Welcome to the Breakup Recovery Podcasts by your host, Barbara Stevens. Discover the wisdom and remarkable insights of Barbara Stevens, breakup recovery mentor, author, and public speaker. Barbara offers programs and solutions for any breakup so you can turn your life around, create lasting changes for the better, and embrace life again.
Hello and welcome to Breakup Recovery Podcast. I'm Barbara Stevens and I'm a breakup recovery mentor. In today's episode, I have with me Patty Blue Hayes. So welcome, Patty.
Hi, Barbara. Thank you so much for having me.
So Patty, tell me about your divorce.
Well, it was quite unexpected and it was incredibly devastating. I felt very blindsided at the time, even though now, with hindsight and perspective, I can see pretty clearly that there were a lot of signs that I wasn't willing to see and realities that I wasn't willing to accept. And we'd been together for about 17 years. It was a wonderful marriage when it started out, and then it devolved into emotional abuse, and I had extremely low self-esteem. There was some substance abuse. I think we both had a little bit of a love affair with alcohol, and it culminated in my finding out about some infidelity, and then he stated that he didn't want to be married anymore. And it was extremely devastating for me because I had basically placed all of my self-worth and my identity on him. And I really didn't have autonomy. I didn't have a healthy sense of self. I didn't have good boundaries. I didn't have self-esteem. And I saw myself as a reflection of what he thought of me. So those are some pretty dangerous aspects when you're going into a divorce, and even unhealthy for a relationship as well.
Was the infidelity a complete shock to you?
It felt like a complete shock at the time. I never in a million years would have guessed that he would have been unfaithful. But again, that hindsight perspective, things appear so much more clearly, and I can clearly see signs that I should have been paying attention to, but I think with the lies about the infidelity, I chose to believe them. And so it appeared like the infidelity was a shock, but when I look back now, there were obvious signs.
Did you have any other challenges other than the substance abuse, the infidelity in your marriage?
I don't think so. For many years, we just got along really well, complemented each other quite well. And I think it was actually when my husband started having more success at work and he started getting a lot of notice and admiration, and he was in the entertainment industry. And I think that kind of fed into his ego. He certainly, the man that I divorced was very, very different from the humble and kind man that I married.
And so the divorce, how did you think that affected you emotionally?
It absolutely broke me. I felt like I was standing in a nuclear wasteland, and I wasn't even sure if I was dead or alive. It was surreal. It was the most intense pain I think I could ever imagine. And I'd been through a lot of loss by death before. My parents had died. I'd lost friends and relatives. But by far, this was a level of pain that, as a writer, I found hard to describe in words. Emotionally, I I felt incredibly broken and abandoned. And I was, I think, trying to tell myself, like, I'm going to get through it. I'm going to get through it. I can do this. I can do this. I've been through loss before, so I'll just, chin up and I'll get through it. But, I was having a lot of suicidal behavior. I was drinking excessively. I was seeking attention from men as a way to deal with the rejection from my husband. I was driving at high speeds. I drove while intoxicated. I didn't care what happened to me. So in a way, I was kind of hoping that maybe something would happen to me, and that way I wouldn't have to make a decision. I wanted to just sleep forever. I wanted the pain to go away forever. I wanted to be put in a coma and wake up healed and whole and fine. So some of those things, if any of your listeners having those thoughts, they're definitely a pretty clear indication that you're in crisis. And at first I was pretty numb for a while, for a couple of months, like in shock. And then I had returned from a 1-month volunteer trip that I did. And in January, this was 3 months after the end of the marriage, I did try to end my life with an overdose because the emotional pain actually became physical. It was physical, it was mental, it was emotional, and it was just all consuming. Even in my sleep, when I could sleep, there was no relief because I was having nightmares and, just awful dreams about him. And it just felt like there was nowhere that I could go to get away from those painful thoughts. And, there's a lot of shame and stigma that people have about suicide. And I have to tell you, in a funny and odd way, when I was in the psychiatric hospital, I actually felt understood. I was with other people who had experienced the same depth of pain that I was in. And we didn't have, we accepted one another and we comforted one another. We knew the pain that we were in. And we were just human beings from all different races and male, female, different beliefs, different backgrounds in life, different experiences. But that pain was that common thread that wove through our lives at that time.
So how did you get past those thoughts of suicide?
It did take a while. I was working with a therapist, so I was seeing my therapist twice a week. And in hindsight, looking back, I probably should have had more support lined up after being released from the hospital. The hospital wasn't actually in touch with my therapist or my doctor. And what I would suggest now, if I were looking back and, giving myself advice, I would have gone to maybe an outpatient program or a suicide support group of some type for people who had made attempts, even if it was something online. I think that would have been helpful just to stay connected with people who had a similar experience, because divorce can feel very isolating. It was for me. And then with the behavior that I was doing, with over drinking and, going out on the prowl at night, I was very ashamed of that behavior. So I was isolating a lot. I didn't want word to get back to my ex. That would somehow, give him proof, like, well, see, that's why I divorced her. She's crazy, or things like that. So a lot of support is necessary. It's crucial, really, to work past those feelings. So mine took a while, I think, with time, and I did have a good intention of healing. I knew that I'd healed from the losses of my parents by death. I felt pretty determined, but I also was in denial a lot about my feelings. And so when I finally learned to use my emotions as a guide and allow them just to flow through me, that really helped a lot, because I think suppressing feelings and suppressing the emotions can often be more dangerous than actually just letting those emotions come out.
So, Patty, did your husband ever find out about your suicide attempt?
I don't think so.
Patty, I understand that you're a heartbreak recovery life coach and speaker and author. Did your experience with your own breakup help you to help other people?
Yes, very much so. It's interesting. When I look back over my life, I was 11 years old and in sixth grade, and I knew that I wanted to write a book that would help adults. And I remember feeling very frustrated that at 11 years old, I had nothing wise to impart to any adults. And I had interesting life experiences, definitely things that I could have shared and written about, but I didn't. My writing was maybe short stories, and I journaled, but I never intended on my journals to be public. I wrote screenplays, nothing really came of that. I wrote articles, and it wasn't until I was sitting in the airport on the way home from vacation when I found out about the infidelity that, I heard a little voice just say, "Pick up a pen, this is your book." And I just documented everything, the journaling. So basically it was a journal with the intent to publish, to share that. And I didn't want to publish the story that unfolded. I wanted to write about doing volunteer work as a means of healing a broken heart. And I did that. I got myself involved in a lot of different volunteer projects. But, then there was this dark underbelly of pain that just would not go away. And I was choosing to numb out. So that was all being journaled about as well. And then the decision to publish was scary because, you're really laying yourself out there in a very vulnerable position. But I thought, there's no way that I can be the only person in the world who has behaved like this due to feeling so broken. And I need to share my story so that other people don't feel as alone as I did, because I felt like a freak. I felt like an anomaly. So I think it's so important to share stories and to be vulnerable, because that's what unites us as human beings.
Did you think that you were a freak or an anomaly because you had no friends or you didn't know anyone else that had tried to take their own life due to their breakup?
I think it was maybe some of that. And, I would read magazines, and there were just stories of women who they looked so perfectly put together. Now, of course, I know it's a magazine shoot. They're there to be polished and pretty. But their stories were all about how it was devastating to them when they got divorced. And then within a year, they started a business and they were living the life of their dreams. And they had exotic love affairs with handsome men. And I was losing hair, vomiting over the sink, bringing home strangers, and trying to get out of bed just to take a shower, and that would be a good day. So I felt like there was just such a disconnect and contrast between what my experience was and what I thought I should be, how I thought I should have been coping. And a lot of that had to do with my self-esteem and my self-worth and the dynamics of my relationship, because there are plenty of women who do handle divorces in a much different way. And I think if they have a strong sense of autonomy, it might not feel as debilitating. But there are plenty of people like myself who feel absolutely crushed and broken. And then you also, that loss of family. His family was, I considered them to be my family. And so that loss of family was another layer of that loss.
So you lost all contact with his family after your divorce?
Not entirely. There was polite contact for a while, and then that trailed off. And it's interesting to me how sometimes these losses can just, kind of they ebb and flow throughout the years. When there's a death in the family, I wasn't there to be with the family and mourn a loss. I won't be there for weddings that are coming up or graduations that are happening or new generations that are coming in. And so those things over time, while the pain is not as severe as, when you're first going through that separation, it's a melancholy and a sadness. But now I know how to just deal with those feelings and allow them to be there. And they're not obviously as intense as when the split first happened.
So how do you deal with those feelings?
Well, it was definitely a growing and learning period to go from denying, avoiding, and numbing to dealing with them, feeling them, allowing them to just, flow through my body. I do believe that emotions are energy in motion. When we have a tight throat or a stomach ache or a headache or physical pain in the shoulders or that hollow feeling, like I constantly felt hollow and nauseous. And it's human nature to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So it was a challenge to go from the pleasure seeking, which can then turn into, abusing substances. It was a challenge to give that up, to not rely on that, and to just be okay with those uncomfortable feelings. And what I like to do now is just allow them, give them space, give them some room. If I'm feeling sad, I can light a candle, I can put on sad music, I can make it very dramatic, I can make it melodramatic. Set the stage for the feeling. If I'm feeling angry, I can go out in the garden and till the soil. And believe me, I have tilled the soil until, I think I could have dug to China. And, I'd like to physically do something that expresses the emotion. So often we try and, prevent ourselves from crying. But crying is healthy for us. It's a way to express an emotion. And then I also will try to do something positive for myself after, let's say, if there's a couple hours or half a day or 5 minutes even of a lower emotion, I'll just try and bring in some kindness, some kind affirmations, maybe, put on some uplifting music, just to shift out of that energy if I've been expressing, sadness or anger. Also, I try and use boundaries, knowing like if I'm going through anger, that's not the time to go to the DMV and try and get, any paperwork done and your license renewed. It's not time to talk to people who might be triggering. It's not time to, email business emails. So being aware of my emotions and kind of the, how they'll extend out and affect, my day is also very helpful.
Patty, what's the name of your book and where can people get your book from?
I have 2 books. One of them, the one that profiles the story, is called Wine, Sex, and Suicide, My Near-Death Divorce, and that's on Amazon. And the other book is My Heart is Broken, Now What? And that's also on Amazon, and that's only a Kindle book. That book is 12 practices that I found to be the most helpful that I gathered up along this very bumpy path of healing. There's not necessarily a guidebook that somebody plops down at your door when you're starting to go through a divorce. And I wish there had been. I wish that there'd been a map or some guidance that I could have tried to follow.
Patty, thank you for coming on Breakup Recovery podcast and talking about that very taboo subject of suicide and how your breakup affected you and led you to those feelings of suicide and action that you took. I think I need to get you back on so that we can talk about the tools that you use with your clients to help mend their hearts and get them back on track after their breakup. So we'll leave that for another day. But thank you very much for sharing your very honest and candid story.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
If you feel that you are still struggling with your breakup, if you are experiencing intense feelings of anger, resentment and bitterness, and it is taking over your life, I'm here to help you in this area of moving on and coping after your breakup. I work with my clients one-on-one through my mentoring program. If you want to learn more about how we can work together, contact me via email or my Facebook page, Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor, and book in for my free 30-minute sounding board session, and we can set up a time that suits. In this free session, you will walk away with clarity about your situation, strategies and tools to start building the future you deserve. So together we can start your journey of recovery. All my information is on my website, www.barbarastevens.com.au. If you don't want to miss an episode of Breakup Recovery Podcast, subscribe on iTunes, and I would appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review and rate the podcast. Also feel free to message me with any questions that you have about Breakup Recovery podcasts or subjects that you want me to cover in future podcast episodes by clicking on the contact button of my website or my Facebook page. I'm always looking for ways to help you recover from your breakup. And the last thing I'd like to say is, be gentle on yourself. You deserve happiness.
If you would like to hear previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, visit barbarastevens.com.au. Connect with Barbara Stevens on social media with Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor on Facebook and at You'll Be Okay on Twitter. Read further blogs, view webinar replays, and download your free ebook, 3 Easy Steps to Surviving Your Breakup, and much more at barbarastevens.com.au.